So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Top Talk webinar session. Hi, Marco. How you doing?
Hello, Jay. How are you? You okay?
I'm very good, mate. So tonight, you're joining us from Ireland, I believe.
I am. Yes, we've just moved here about 3 or 4 months ago, so we're just getting used to the place. It's lovely.
Excellent, but not so nice tonight, you said.
It's absolutely pouring down at the moment. It's pretty atrocious weather. My partner's gone out with all the dogs, and she's doing us a huge favour because it is vile out there. But yeah, I'm
Well,
nice and dry. So that's good.
well, I think we got the best straw. Well, you got the best straw there anyway, and yeah, she deserves a big glass of wine later, and some care and attention from you, I'm sure, mate. What I
Absolutely.
realised just chatting to you again recently, obviously we've been friends for a while now, is we first started talking about the going down of the sun 2 years ago, which is quite
Yeah.
incredible, isn't it? Really.
Yes.
So obviously we're going to talk a lot about it tonight, or you are, I was going to say. But just before we get into that and getting into the actual project and the photography itself, just tell us a little bit about you, Marco, and sort of your journey into photography and kind of how where we got to today, mate.
Okay, well, I originally started out as a marine biologist, and I had a degree in that and worked as one for about a year or so. But I ended up counting barnacles and got very kind of bored and frustrated with the whole kind of scientific background. And I'd always wanted to be an artist. Very fortunately, I managed to get back to go to art college, and I picked up a camera and I started working in press photography. And it just really, the bug just caught me. This is years ago. This is back in 1987. So I've been a photographer quite a number of years now. The primary thing that I used to work at was people photography. So it was portraiture, fashion work, various things like that, editorial, and some celebrity portraiture as well. And I ran a studio in Bristol and Bath until very recently. And I've just given that up now because I'm concentrating primarily now on my fine art work and my landscape work and some lecturing and so on. So it's quite quite a journey through the last 20 or so years.
And yeah, brilliant. I mean, I remember obviously us talking about specifically, at the going down of the sun. Obviously, 2 years ago now was the first time. So, when the project was in well, you were in shooting mode then, obviously,
Yeah.
and the progression is incredible. So it's turned into obviously a personal project. So obviously, I know you're going to outline it in a bit more depth and how the nocturnal side of the photography took place. But now we have an exhibition. Is it in Bath or is it in Bristol Cathedral?
It's in Bristol Cathedral. So it's running, it started on the 5th of September and it goes through until the 18th of November. And it's also going to be the point where the launch of the Bristol Poppy Appeal in the next couple of days.
Oh, that's
So
incredible.
yeah.
And is
Yeah.
there set times, or can you just go freely to see the exhibition? Obviously, not within service time, obviously.
The entry to the cathedral. It opens at 8 o'clock in the morning, and on weekdays it closes at 5 in the evening. And then weekends rather, it opens at 8 in the morning, and it goes through till 3:15 Saturdays and Sundays. So it's 7 days a week. I believe so far we've had around about 30,000 visitors.
Brilliant.
So
Well,
yeah, they have a kind of electronic counter as people come in. So they've been counting the numbers, and so far I think we're just over 30,000 visitors, which is amazing.
oh, that's phenomenal. I mean, obviously, I was very lucky to be invited to the opening evening, which I couldn't make, as you well know, and why. But I will definitely. It's only down the road for me, so I will definitely be visiting before that finishes, without a doubt. I'm looking forward to it. And actually, what I just realised today as well is obviously we did some film of you actually shooting some of the projects. So
You did, yes.
that's available on the Photographer Academy, which is great. So obviously want them to interact with you, Marco. So I've got some links on the screen. I will be sharing those via the chat panel with everybody as well. The At the Going Down of the Sun photography is the Facebook page to find out all about it, isn't it? And obviously, the other thing that we want to talk about briefly before we get into the presentation is that there is a bit of a Kickstarter fund to try and get a book made. So we'll talk about that a little bit more after. Obviously, we know a lot more. You've shared the project with the audience tonight, but I'll make sure the links go out to everybody. So, Marco, if it's okay with you, I will give you the screen because I know you've got quite a lot to share with people. So it's coming over. We've got a slight delay, guys. I think it's because of the weather. So you should be getting the request to share your screen now, Marco.
Okay, that's gone through.
So I'm seeing it nice and clear. I can see it in full screen mode. I can hear you loud and clear. So any questions you have for Marko, please pop them through the question panel. Marko, you feel free at any time just to say, Jay, are there any questions? Obviously, if I don't interrupt, then we'll ask them at the end. So I'm going to go quiet, but at any point, you just chip in if you need me to check if there's questions for you, pal. It's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along tonight. As I said, the project is called Out the Going Down of the Sun, and I've been working on this for 4 years now. I approached a cemetery called Arnos Vale in Bristol, and I asked them if I could wander around the cemetery at night photographing their graves. And they didn't call the police, they didn't lock me up, they were actually really into the idea. So I did a 6-month project with them, and we did a number of pop-up exhibitions, and we got a fantastic response to it. So I approached a number of organisations, Bristol City Council, Western-super-Mare Town Council, Bath and North East Somerset Towns Council, and they all actually gave me an opportunity to go into the graves at night. They gave me keys, and I wandered around all these wonderful graveyards at night, photographing. Primarily it was Commonwealth War Graves, but I also photographed things like civilian war graves, and as you'll see in some instances, even enemy war graves as well. And there's a number of memorials and various things like that. Now, the reason that I decided to photograph at night was very, very simple, because when you go to the armistice ceremony, at the last post, they always read out a poem, which is called For the Fallen. And the poet is called Laurence Binyon. And part of that poem talks about remembering people at the going down of the sun. So I took that very obvious kind of link and decided to kind of photograph during that time period that the poem mentioned. And the lovely thing about it, I realized, was that it meant that not only did I photograph the graves, but I also actually photographed all the things that went on around the graves that we don't normally notice. So rather than these kind of images being very dark and, moody and drab, they were actually full of color and life and light. And that was things like, the light pollution from the street lights, car trails, plane trails, even satellite trails. And I realized that I was capturing, our contemporary society, as well as actually obviously these graves. So I've been kind of working on that basis to kind of show how relevant it is still to us. So I'm just going to start kind of clicking through a few of the images here. So this is the first image, and it's a shot of the installation at the cathedral. Now, it's actually the very first part as you walk in. Those chairs aren't normally there. They were being set up for a concert at the cathedral, but normally you could walk straight up to those images and obviously look at them nice and close up. The images themselves are 42 inches across. So hopefully, that's almost 4 foot across. So it gives you some idea of the scale of them, and also obviously the scale of the actual cathedral. And obviously you can see from it that it's actually a very, very grand place to actually have an exhibition. It's a wonderful experience to be able to hang there, and I feel really, really honoured to be part of that kind of environment and have my work hung in that environment. So that what you're looking at the moment is the very first part. And in fact, the picture you're looking at initially is actually the very first picture I took. And it is exactly what I wanted. And I remember looking at the back of my camera and thinking, I have got a project here. So that's how you actually walk in the door. And what actually happens is you travel around the cathedral, and you go to various parts of the cathedral, and you'll see different images in different parts. And the idea is that I wanted to integrate it actually within the architecture of the cathedral itself. So you could kind of look around and see the kind of monuments there and the memorials, and also see these images. And it was also very important to me because you'll see in a moment with some of the installation images that they are surrounded by memorials. And, to put a memorial in that place, especially in sort of Georgian and Victorian times, you would have needed an awful lot of money to have been able to do that. Now, the people whose graves I photographed are ordinary people, whatever that word ordinary actually means. They are people like me and you. So they're not the kind of people who are generally memorialized in cathedrals and town halls and so on. But what they've done is an extraordinary sacrifice. And for me, it's actually a real, it gives me a sense of pride to, at least if only temporarily, have these people within this extraordinary space. So I'm just going to click onto the next image here. Now, one of the lovely things about this is that once I started working on these, you start to kind of find out, you know, particular gravestones which are actually really interesting, and the more that you dig into them, the more that you find out about the lives of these people and the connections and the stories. So just to give you an example of this one here, you can see the grave itself. There are two people buried here, a C.T. Hynam and a W.H. Warlock. Now, it doesn't look as if there's any immediate connection whatsoever. And in fact, you know, one of them was actually an able seaman, and the other one was in the Somerset Light Infantry. And that's reflected in there at the top of the gravestone. You'll see two regimental badges. And that's quite unusual, because that's normally only done if it's father or son or two brothers. In this case, the connection is actually a woman, and the woman is Rose Marion Hynam, and she is the wife of C.T. Hynam and the sister of W.H. Warlock. So she's unfortunately, within the space of, I think, about 2 years, had to bury both her husband and her brother. And then once you sort of see beyond these small little references, you begin to kind of see just how poignant these stories are, and how much kind of grief and loss people have had to kind of suffer, you know, and that extraordinary moment in the First World War. It's actually something that goes on all the way through. So I haven't just photographed First World War graves. I photographed Second World War, Bosnia, Gulf War, and so on. But all of them have, you know, these little very human, intimate, personal stories to them. And that's what I wanted to bring out. So the next one is actually a civilian war grave. I'm going to show you an image in a moment, which I took. It took me almost 2 years to get this particular image. And one such occasion, I tried to get an image elsewhere in the cemetery and I couldn't get it. I'll explain why in a second. But I saw a kind of glow in the distance. So I walked down to the other end of the cemetery and I came across this little angel above the gravestone. Now, these are civilian war graves from the from the Bristol Blitz. And obviously this is a little wreath that's been placed on this kind of gravestone. The grave is actually for a lady called Bessie Price, and she was killed in a bombing raid in 1942. And again, I've done a lot of research on it, and it's a pretty horrendous story, because the bomb was actually dropped from 20,000 feet. So nobody knew it was coming, and it actually hit rush hour traffic in Bristol. And it hit a car, first of all. It was a 2,000-pound bomb. And essentially, as it hit the car, it atomized the petrol. So it created a fireball, and it killed 38 people in one go, 14 of whom were children on a school bus. So it's, you know, it's horrendous. It's the kind of thing that it beggars belief when you hear those kind of stories, and you realize that these are actually things that happen, you know, in our hometowns, and not just in Bristol, but throughout the UK. This actual spot where this actually happened, there's no memorial to it at all. And in fact, the actual area now is actually Harvey Nichols. So there's a great big brand new sort of shopping plaza and a great big very plush Harvey Nichols, and absolutely no memory of it whatsoever to the people who go shopping there. So it was very kind of important to me to be able to kind of do this, you know, small memorialization. And whoever actually put this little angel on there, you know, 76 years later, obviously shares that same kind of sense of poignancy with me. Okay, so I'll go to the next picture. As I said before, I always try to kind of, with this project, to make the small kind of intimate details matter, to make, kind of bring out these little stories. But this one, I don't know if anybody's a football fan out there, but this is the ground, this is the entrance gates to Bristol Rovers Football Club, and it's actually called the Memorial Ground, as you can see actually on the gate itself. And on the side there, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it actually mentions about the people who were killed in 1914 to 18, and again in 1939 to 45. And the idea of this memorial is that every time somebody walks through that ground, they remember these people. So it's a kind of living, if you like, reminder of the sacrifices that people made, so that people could use these spaces and could continue to have a lifestyle like that. So this is actually a photograph during a match, and it was Bristol Rovers versus Swindon Town. Now, I don't know where you're all from, but if anybody's from Swindon, Swindon actually won that match that particular night. But yeah, it's just there. It's a constant reminder and I think quite a lovely one as well. I'm going through to this image here, and this is the one that took me 2 years to actually photograph. Now, again, if you can see my cursor, the moon starts off at around about here. You have to have a full moon to get a picture like this, and it gradually travels round, and you get a 10-minute gap where it actually hits the plinths, and each plinth then actually is fully illuminated by the moon. Otherwise, you get a kind of dark shadow is cast by the previous plinth. So I'd waited. I went out there, it must be about 10 times, set my camera up, got ready to do it, looked at the moon, had a clear sky, and I thought, fantastic, this is it. And just about a minute beforehand, a cloud goes across the moon. And not only does it affect, obviously, the exposure, but it also obviously affects the kind of quality of the light. So you don't get this bright, clear, sharp light. So that actually happened 10 times over 2 years. And on the 11th occasion, I finally got this picture. Just one of the strange things about this plinth, if you can see closely in there, you can see the names of all the people who were buried in Greenbank Cemetery, which is the cemetery this is at. And there are actually still blank spaces, which is slightly unnerving, considering that this is something that might still be used in the future. You know, we don't seem to have kind of progressed in some ways. Okay, so the next picture here, this is a very, very individual picture. This one is of squadron leader Nicholas H Robbins, and you can see obviously his gravestone in the background, and in the foreground there's obviously a large poppy reef. Now if you notice in there, there are lots and lots of little kind of elves and toys and so on, and they're there for a very particular reason, because he used to play a game with his children. You can see their names on there, Tanith and Ewan, and what he used to do, he used to say there were fairies at the bottom of the garden, and he used to hide all the little elves and so on down the garden. Sometimes he'd hide them in the kitchen, the bathroom, and tell them, oh, they've come in the house. So they continue to do this. They continue to have this kind of, if you like, conversation with him. I found that really kind of heartbreaking. You know, it's very, very poignant, and it shows that, you know, people find different ways to remember people, to keep people's memories alive. One other little strange thing about this, if you see here, there's a Star of David. Now, this is not a Jewish family. However, if you look in the background here and all around here, there are actually lots and lots of little small pebbles. And the widow, Laura, was a little bit confused. And I said, well, are you a Jewish family? She said, no. I said, well, it's just that you've got a Star of David on there. She said, oh, the kids loved it because they said Dad was a star in heaven. So, well, actually, probably people think it's a Jewish symbol. So they're leaving pebbles on there to remember him. To make sure that you know that he's still remembered. It's a Jewish tradition, and she was very, very touched by that. So again, it's another way about that people use to kind of remember people, really. If I just click on, that's the picture of him, and that's with Tanith and Ewan. And again, it's a silly picture. They've got it on their kitchen wall, and it's just one of a silly picture, but it shows, you know, how much even the smallest intimate photograph can mean to somebody, how important it can be to somebody. Okay. Now this next picture is what would appear these two initial gravestones are actually not connected. You've got obviously you've got the Commonwealth War Grave one here with Anna Lowenthal, and then next to it you have a lady called Kathleen Tripp. In actual fact, these are two sisters. Now they both escaped Nazi Germany in 1938 with another sister, Lisa. Now Lisa went to Israel, but Anna died when she was only 22, and Kathleen, or her original name was Kata Lowenthal. She then married and became Kathleen Tripp, and her pen name, because she's a very well-known poet and writer, is Karen Gershon. And she died 50 years later, so you can see on the gravestone there. So there's actually a 50-year separation between the two of them, but Karen asked if she could be buried next to her sister. This is in the Hebrew cemetery in Bristol. So there's a very sort of touching, again, this thing about wanting to be near your family. And one of the things that I'm doing with the actual exhibition as well is that you go through, and we have, with some of the images, we've put portraits of the people next to them. And I've also put QR codes as well. Now, QR codes, essentially, if you scan them with a smartphone, you can actually then listen to the voices of people talking about these people. So in fact, I have the daughter of Kathleen Tripp, Stella Tripp, who is an artist, who is actually talking about her mother and her mother's experiences and so on. And she actually went back to Germany and what it was like for her to go back to Germany. Obviously, they lost their parents in Nazi Germany. They both were killed in concentration camps. So if I just click across, so this lady here is actually Anna Tripp. This was photographed back in 1942, I think. And then her sister, who is Karen, is here. This was actually photographed a lot later in later life. But those are the two sisters there. And just to add a little bit of extra poignancy, this is actually the photograph of all three sisters in Germany. Her father was a very well-known architect, and so he died in a concentration camp, even though he was a member of the German army. So this little girl here is Anna. This girl here is Lisa, who is the person who's not in these pictures. And then the smallest one is Karen. So, you know, again, just to kind of give you a context, to give you an idea of the kind of human cost of what these graves actually represent. Okay, so I'm going to go on a little bit. What I tried to do with these pictures is there's so many kind of subject areas, so many kind of things that you can talk about. So I'm going to point out, first of all, this is still a war grave. It doesn't actually have a Commonwealth War Grave on it. That could be for a number of reasons. One could be that simply the ground isn't stable enough to put one there, or presumably the family have to request a Commonwealth War Grave. Now, this family very obviously probably didn't do, but they've got a very, you know, what would have been an extremely expensive and prestigious marble slab across this grave. It's an Angus Porter. Originally, he was born in Birmingham. He became a sub-lieutenant in the Royal Navy, and he died on the 14th of March, 1916. And what I want to draw your attention to, can you see here, my God, my King, my country? It's a very kind of strident, very patriotic, in some ways, probably quite old-fashioned view of what your life is for. And I'm not going to question that the advantages or disadvantages of that, but it's obviously it takes a certain amount of bravery to be able to have that kind of point of view. Now, I did it as part of this project. I actually worked with students from City of Bristol College, and I got them to photograph graves in this cemetery. And this particular cemetery has a high percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds who have got Commonwealth War Graves because they were primarily killed in training accidents. When these students were actually photographing, you know, they're 16, 17, and it really brought it home to them that 100 years ago, that could have been them. So they were really kind of quite taken aback by that you know, how much their society has changed, that they're not conscripted and they're not kind of forced to go into the army or the navy or so on, and they have a kind of option, a choice in it. So it really was something that brought it home to them. Now, this particular picture in the cathedral, I've put next to this one. And again, you're probably wondering why on earth I photographed this picture, because it looks just like a straightforward graveyard, and there's nothing particular to look for. What I want to do is bring your attention to this area here, because this is lit by a single flash, and it's actually the grave of a conscientious objector. He's called Albert Thomas Kendal. And it looks as if, from what I've been able to research about him, that his family were a little bit embarrassed about him being a conscientious objector. So they basically buried him in an unmarked grave when he died, and the family lost all track of where he was actually buried. Fortunately for me, I managed to locate his grandson, and then I did a lot of research with various people at Bristol City Council, and they were great because they actually helped me to locate the grave. So I brought him there, and I stood next to it, and I said, well, this is your grandfather's grave. And he said, well, where is it? And I said, it's here. And, you know, I pointed to this particular spot here. He was really taken aback by that. He was really quite upset about it, because he felt as if his grandfather had kind of been wiped out of history to a certain extent. But anyway, you know, he's managed to find out an awful lot about his grandfather. It turns out he was a very skilled carpenter and joiner, and he built and contributed to some of the most significant buildings in Bristol. So what his grandson is now doing with the rest of the family is they're actually putting together to put a small memorial onto this actual grave site so that his grandfather is remembered again. And again, I'm not going to make any kind of judgments about or compare it to the previous one, but I think what I was trying to say was that I think that there's a certain amount of bravery in both of these people's attitudes to how they, you know, look towards war and how they were involved within it. Okay, so I'm going to go to my next picture now, and this gentleman here on the left hand side is Albert Thomas Kendal. So it's really quite strange when you start to kind of see these people firsthand, as it were. You see their faces, you find out about them, you find out the details, where they were born, the houses they lived in. It's really quite, you know, initially when I was doing this, it was really very, very revealing to me. I felt a considerable amount of empathy with these people. It really brought it home to me just how poignant these are, and how, you know, these people are not very different from us at all. They're very, very similar to us in their hopes and aspirations, and, you know, their faults and so on, and what they did and to make a everyday existence. Okay, so my next picture. This is quite an ironic picture in a sense, because if you look here, we've got two war graves here, Commonwealth War Graves. This is in Greenbank Cemetery in Bristol, and these are ARP wardens, so air raid protection wardens. Next to them, however, there are two Luftwaffe pilots, Herbert Brosick and Hans Cheppelt. So there's a little bit of irony in the fact that they're placed next to each other. These particular Germans here, you can't see it because of the rose bush, but they've actually got different dates of death. They're different by a day. In actual fact, they were shot down by a pilot called Royce in a hurricane, and the plane broke up in midair. And so basically, unfortunately for them, they were buried in not to put it too indelicately, in pieces. But Brosick's body wasn't actually found until a day later. So his actual date of death is given as a day later. But just an absolute irony there. Now, another interesting thing about this particular gravestones is when these pilots were buried and if prisoners of war were buried, there's a line of houses here. Now, these are modern houses, but there originally was a terrace down there, and this is the main entrance going into the actual cemetery itself. And when these pilots and the other prisoners of war, if they were German, were buried, people actually came to their front doors and they took their hats off and you know, nodded their heads and kind of paid respect to those people. I think the idea essentially was that if they would do it to the people that were buried here, then hopefully people would do the same kind of thing in Germany, you know, to the people who were lost over there. So there is still, you know, a certain kind of respect, a certain kind of, you know, empathy towards people, even though obviously they are causing, you know, a lot of destruction, a lot of harm. And that is actually a portrait of Hans Cheppelt, one of the actual pilots. Again, it's very, very strange to see these pictures. It gives you a kind of very immediate link to these people. Again, this is actually another portrait. Another picture. This is taken in a different cemetery. It's Camford Cemetery, and you can see it's actually been snowing. It was actually a blizzard at the time. But because it's a long exposure, you can't actually see all the snow. But I can promise you it was around about -12, and I spent 5 hours photographing various gravestones in this cemetery at that time. When I got back to my car, I don't know if you ever see these pictures of polar explorers where they have kind of icicles in their beards. Well, I had icicles in my beards, icicles in my eyebrows, and icicles in my hair. It was so cold. So if nothing else, I'm either completely mad or very, very dedicated. Now, this one here, a particular pilot is K.G. Evans. He was killed in a plane crash. Now, it's actually, in a sense, this is actually quite a lucky grave because the plane actually crashed right in the center of Bristol. It hit a barrage balloon, They were on the last training flight, and because they were flying at 16,000 feet, they hit a barrage balloon, and they had the cable tangled around their wing, and it basically brought their plane down. And they managed to bring it down in the centre of a park called St Andrew's Park, which is right in the suburbs of Bristol. It came down amongst an avenue houses, and the only damage it caused was actually to knock a chimney pot off and knock the top of a pine tree. And it came to rest about 10 foot away from a row of houses. I mean, there could have been hundreds and hundreds of people killed. In actual fact, unfortunately, there were 3 people killed. And they were the 2 pilots, KG Evans and John Charles, and also the wireless operator, Lever. But they were extremely lucky, and the other 3 crew members were pulled out by members of the public who actually very bravely managed to kind of fight their way through the flames and pull them out. And in fact, the actual site was cleared the next day by around about 10 o'clock the next day, because the MOD at the time didn't want people to know there'd been a plane crash in order to affect morale. It was actually kept quiet until about the 1970s. And nowadays, there's actually a memorial in the park to them. But, you know, it's not very, very far away from us. Okay, our next one here, civilian war grave. And you can see here there is a whole family. You can see the parents here, William and Carrie, both 40 years of age, so no age really, and these are all their children. You know, all 6th of December 1940, one of the Bristol blitzes. So you've got Joyce 15, Vera 13, Willie 12, Barbara 10, Norman 8, and these are by no means the youngest people in this particular patch of graves. There are 4-year-olds. I've even come across one where it's a 4-month-old baby. So, you know, remarkable stories, remarkable hardship, heartbreak, you know, remarkable hardship. Okay, and then the next one, this one again, this is in Hakem Cemetery in Bath. Again, a lovely little story to go with this, because the name on here is Mary Kilminster. And if you look here, this is what the family have put here afterwards. And they've got Lillian, 1911 till 1993, rests here with daughter Mary, age 7, and grandson Kelvin. Now, Mary was the little girl, age 7, who was killed in the bombing raid. It was a direct hit on what was called the Rosebery Road air shelter, and she was killed. Her mother, Lillian, had her leg cut off, and her husband at the time was killed, as was her 2 brothers and her father. And there were another 18 people killed in this one kind of bomb shelter. Mary was blown out of the shelter and was killed, but her sister Shirley was blown out of the shelter but escaped without a scratch, absolutely no scratch whatsoever. Lillian had the rest of her leg decapitated. She had to have it amputated, and she remarried. And this is actually being placed here by herself and by her son, who's half brother to Mary. Now, her son is a lovely man called Chris, and he's kind of really looked into this, and he's found out all about the Rosebery Road, and the actual area is now being redeveloped, and it's going to be housing, but part of it is going to be set aside, and it's going to be a park, and the developers are going to call the park Mary's Walk. One of the just really odd little things about photographing this, and also kind of getting, I interviewed Chris for the oral histories that we have with the pictures, and the developers have been digging up the site, and they've been giving him any kind of remains and finds they found there. So they found things like an unopened cider bottle, and you know, cups and mugs, and the corner of a bedspread, and tiles from his mother's kitchen. And one of the weirdest things that he's found, it was really odd, he handed it to me. It's a very large piece of very heavy metal. It's around about 1 foot long, around about 9 inches across, and it's around about 2 to 3 inches thick. And it's part of the bomb casing that actually hit the actual bomb shelter. And you hold that in your hand, and I can promise you it's a very, very, very strong, strange feeling to actually have that in your hand. Very, very odd feeling indeed. So just to go on, this is a picture of Mary. So this is the little girl that was killed. And again, I'm going to go to a more contemporary grave now. This is actually the grave of Christopher John Addis. It's in Long Ashton Cemetery, which is All Saints Cemetery. Again, I photographed in quite a number of parish churches. This is his gravestone. He was killed, he died actually 31st December 1998, only 26 years of age. And again, I've interviewed his parents. They contributed an interview to the actual oral history, which you can hear at the cathedral. This area in the background is a memorial to Polish aircrew. Their plane came down in a field just beyond this wall here. So the parents asked if he could be specifically buried near to the other aircrew's memorial, which the parish church allowed to happen. And you can see on here, there are lots and lots of poppies. And in fact, what his father does, his father's, they're quite elderly now. They're sort of late 70s, early 80s. And his father has put poppies on all of the graves in the cemetery that have any kind of war connection. So it's a kind of almost like a mini, you know, the wave and the kind of thing at the Tower of London. If you go into the churchyard, you'll see lots and lots of these little poppies, you know, spread around the actual graveyard itself. And on each one of them, it also has a label telling you a little bit about the history of the person that's in there, the reason the poppy's there. His father also raises money for the Royal British Legion, for the poppy appeal in particular. So, you know, the poppy has got a very particular kind of resonance with this family. Lovely people, you know, very, very brave of them to talk about the, you know, the death of the son and what actually happened and so on. He was killed in Bosnia, and it was actually an engine fault. The prop on the helicopter, the shaft broke on it and it crashed. He was actually, the other crew members were killed, and he was actually seriously injured actually on the 24th of December, and they brought him back to the UK, but they had to switch the life support off on the 31st because, you know, there wasn't any chance of him recovering. So incredibly poignant story here, you know, and this is a young man, only 26 years of age, and that's actually him. He was a champion skier as well. So again, you can see just how immediate, you know, this is only a young man, no age whatsoever. Again, it has a certain poignancy for me because my birthday is New Year's Eve. So I look at this grave and I think of the different things that were happening to me on that day and what were obviously happening to him and to his parents. And this is a QR code. So when you hear me talking about QR codes, underneath 9 of these images, there are these little kind of symbols. And if you don't know what these are, essentially, if you have a smartphone or you can get a phone, you can put a little app on it, and it's called a QR scanner. And all you have to do is you just point it at the actual QR code like this, and it will actually let you hear the voices of people talk about these people. In fact, in one case, you'll actually even be able to hear the voice of the person who's actually buried. And you can do this anywhere in the world. And once you kind of log into the Bristol Cathedral website and go to their SoundCloud, you could hear these anywhere you go. So there's a couple of magazine articles which have been done about it, one in Camera Craft magazine. And if you click on the QR code in there, if you're in Australia or Canada or wherever you are in the world, you'll be able to hear those voices. So again, you know, it's something that I wanted to do to really kind of spread the reach of this exhibition. And this is another installation shot, just to show you what it looks like actually in the cathedral. So this is the image of Chris's grave here. And you can see his picture, the QR code underneath. This is the Isaacs family. And then this is Mary's picture. And that's Mary and Lillian, her mother, and also the QR code underneath it. And again, if you look all the way around the cathedral, there are hundreds of memorials to people. They're even in the floor. And in fact, there are actually quite a number of people who are actually buried in the cathedral, actually within the walls and under the floor. There are crypts in there. So this is actually a cemetery in its own, you know, it is a cemetery itself. So that, you know, this is, I think, a wonderful space to actually have this. And I just felt it was very, very appropriate to have these kind of memorials to what people might describe as ordinary or normal people. in amongst all of these other kind of very grand memorials. Okay, so the scope of the exhibition, I photographed Bristol, Bath and Weston-super-Mare. So this is a view across Weston-super-Mare, just with obviously a grave in the foreground. It's actually an A.J. Wyatt, who was only 17 when he died. And you can see Weston-super-Mare spread out below. This is Milton Road Cemetery. And again, I've kind of restricted the geographical limit of it to kind of Bristol, Bath, Weston-super-Mare and the southwest. There is a potential project. You could do this absolutely around the world. You know, the only problem is obviously that just the immense logistics. I keep on finding new stories, new kind of graves, new things. That somebody told me once that my problem is not starting, my problem is stopping. I could continue to do this for the rest of my life and finding new stories and new kind of things that we could talk about. And again, there are a broad range of people photographed. So this one is an A.T. Paramanathan. You can see there, he is actually from Ceylon, or Sri Lanka as it is now. So there's a huge geographical spread of the different people that are buried here. So this gentleman is from Ceylon. This gentleman is from Jamaica, H.C. Bryan. And this gentleman is from Australia. But there are Canadians, Americans, people, you know, Indians from all over the world. The strangest thing, though, with Bristol is there are no Muslim graves. The reason for the nearest ones I found are in the Brecon Beacons. I have no idea why they're in the Brecon Beacons. The nearest Chinese graves are in Plymouth in Ford Park Cemetery, and the nearest Hindu graves are in the New Forest. But you know, the spread of graves from different nationalities doesn't quite reflect the kind of multicultural nature of Bristol it is these days. It would have been lovely if that had been the case, but it's, you know, I had a geographical limit because it was Bristol Cathedral, so we haven't missed them out because, you know, we didn't want to put them in. We've missed them out because they're simply not in that geographical region. And again, just to show you the range of different graves, this is Polish war graves, and these were photographed on the 31st of October, which is All Souls Eve, or as we call it, Halloween. And part of an Eastern European tradition is to actually put red candles on the graves of people just to kind of ward off evil spirits. I'm half Ukrainian, so I'm obviously half Eastern European. So this is something, you know, that I've done on my own parents' graves. You'll also see just in the background here, can you see this kind of white trail? That's actually a plane coming down to land in Bristol Airport. Haycombe Cemetery, which is where this was photographed, is directly under the flight path to Bristol. And I've got a great little app, and it tells me where the planes are coming from, where they're going to, how many people are on board them, all sorts of things, called Plane Finder. And it's very, very useful because I can, you know, log planes and wait until they're actually in sight and then just take the pictures as and when they're appearing in the actual image. And you get these wonderful trails and star trails and so on. Okay, so again, another installation just to show you in the cathedral. So you can see some of the pictures here. This is the Polish war grave I've just shown you. This is the one Weston-super-Mare. This one here is the memorial gates. And then straight down here is the one that I showed you earlier on the free with the pilot who was killed in St Andrews Park. But you can see it's an absolutely magnificent venue. You know, it's such an honor to be able to exhibit in such an amazing space. And again, just to show you the other way around. And again, if I just point out, this is the German picture with Hans Tschepelt underneath. This is what's called the South Aisle. This area here is where Chris Addis's portrait is. His father is the guy who's actually very strongly involved with the Royal British Legion. During the Poppy Appeal, this is the exact spot where they launched the Poppy Appeal. And this area here is, they hang 1,000 poppies in this particular area all the way down. It's a really amazing sight. And when we had the private view, his parents came along and I explained to them why I'd put it in that particular area because of that connection and because that would actually be you know, I think a very fitting tribute to both himself and both parents and to Chris. And they were really moved by that. And I have to say, as a photographer, that was one of the most poignant and in a way satisfying things I could have done with this, because it actually gave his parents, you know, something to feel, you know, an additional thing to feel proud of, that somebody remembered their son in such a way. I found that very, very moving, and I you know, I found it very moving that I was able to do just a small thing, you know, towards to say thank you to the parents for being involved in this project. So this picture here is another one taken in Camford Cemetery. This is more North Bristol, and it's photographed on November the 5th. So Camford Park, which is just behind here, is where they have the firework display, and obviously you can see those there. So, you know, to us it's actually a real celebration. It's something to kind of enjoy. It's a great occasion. But I did show this to somebody at the Royal British Legion, and they said, you know, how traumatic this is to people, you know, to see that fireworks. And actually, as I was interviewing various people, one of the things that came across very often was that a lot of ex-servicemen absolutely hate bonfire night, November the 5th, because it brings back extremely unpleasant memories. You know, if you've been, you know, hit by mortars, or if you've been in rocket raids or so on, you know, it's very difficult to switch off from that and actually just see it as a kind of as something that's fun. So it gave me the idea that what I would like to do, which I'll talk about in a moment, is we wanted to raise funds to create a book for this, so we could kind of create a legacy for the exhibition above and beyond here. And one of the things I wanted to do was give a percentage of that funding to the Royal British Legion, specifically so they could help them with their work with helping people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And when we did the private view again, it was really lovely, because a number of veterans came along, and they were very, very complimentary about the exhibition. You know, it's great if photographers say, you know, they love the photography and so on. But when people like that who have experienced, you know, that kind of trauma and that kind of stress and endurance, and they've survived it all, and they come up to you and they say good things to you about your work, it really does, you know, bring it home to you that, you know, you're trying to do something good about it all. So yeah, so this is November the 5th. And then one of the things that I found, this is actually a very long exposure image. So it's a different angle from one of the earlier pictures, directly on towards it. And it's actually 190 images. And what I did was I set it up, and the camera took a picture for a minute, every minute, with a 10-second interval in between. And once it's set up, I just went away and left it to it. And it took him over around about 3-hour period. And then I took it home and we put it into a little computer system. It's called Star Stacks. And what it essentially does, the Star Stacks actually recognizes when there's a pixel change. So it'll change wherever is changed, and will add to it. And wherever it's not changed, it will retain it. So essentially what it does, if you can imagine that you've got a dot here, and then another dot and another dot, and so on all the way around. And eventually what the Star Stacks does, it literally draws all these dots together, joins them all up, and you get these wonderful kind of star trails. So it gives you a sense of time, a sense of endurance. And again, some people have asked me and said that the pictures are very beautiful, and I was actually quite taken aback by that, because I thought, am I doing the right thing here by making beautiful pictures about grief and loss? And then it occurred to me, well, actually, you know, these are the things that these people miss. These are the things that we are fortunate to see every day. And now I don't know how many people still look up at the night sky. Where I am now, when it's not pouring down, we get beautiful clear skies because we're in the middle of rural Ireland, and you look at the Milky Way and it's just absolutely staggering. But I don't know how many people still do that these days. So it's nice for me to be able to show, you know, just how beautiful a world it is that we live in, and how much these people actually now miss this. And again, these are other star-stacked pictures. And this one is Greenbank Cemetery. Again, the Sword of Sacrifice. And then, again, that same memorial as I showed you earlier. The way to do this, by the way, if you want to get these circles, is you have to point it at Polaris. So this is Polaris right in the center here. And all the Earth obviously rotates around that point, and that's why you get all the circles. But you can still get fantastic star trail pictures. They just don't get them in circles like this. It depends on the angle that you photograph and the direction that you photograph. Okay, and then this one here, it's probably one of the easiest pictures I've taken in my life, I'm going to be absolutely honest, because I was actually watching TV when I was doing this picture, and I hope that doesn't deride it in any way. But I knew that the International Space Station was due that evening. I knew more or less its kind of plot, the course that it would plot. And this is Haycombe Cemetery. Again, it's a very clear night sky above Haycombe because it's actually at the edge of Bath, so you don't get the light pollution from the city. Again, you've got the start, you've got the plane trails here, so you can see one going across there, both landing at Bristol Airport, one there and one there. And I knew the International Space Station was going across, but I didn't know exactly if I'd get the right angle. And in fact, I've been extremely lucky because that is the International Space Station going across there. And again, exactly the same kind of procedure as before. I set up the camera to take photographs at 1 minute every minute with 10-second interval in between. I think this is 192 images, and there's not an awful lot you can do there. So I simply got back in my car and I watched TV on my iPad for 3 hours. So it's by far the easiest picture I've ever taken in my life. And again, I didn't quite know where I got the International Space Station until we put it into star stacks, and then it all just appeared. It was a wonderful moment. Okay, so just going to finish off with a couple of little bits and pieces here. So I mentioned before that we are having a book that we would like to try and get printed. We've got 10% of it so far, so we're quite away from it yet. The book would have 64 pages in. We'd put in 50 images. So the exhibition has got 24 images in. We would like to have a book of 50 images. I have an archive of 150. So it would be really nice to be able to kind of, make something more permanent from that. I'll also be putting in some of the transcripts from the oral histories, and we'll put in the QR codes so that you'll be able to still link into those for years to come. And also obviously some of the portraits of the people in there. So the book, I hope, would actually create a permanent legacy, and it wouldn't just be about creating a permanent legacy about my pictures. It would also be about creating a permanent legacy about these people's stories. And I think that's actually the most important aspect of it. And so just to finish off, that is the Kickstarter link. Now, I believe Jay will probably send this out to you, but I'm going to leave that on screen there. Because if you kind of type that into your computer, that will take you directly to that previous page, and all the details, all the images and so on are actually illustrated on the Kickstarter page. And there are a variety of rewards with it. So you've got either the book, we are also doing limited edition prints of some of the Star Trail pictures and a few other pictures. And there are postcards, there are all kinds of bits and pieces. And if we can get that off the ground, it would just be amazing to be able to kind of create that permanent legacy and, obviously create permanent stories about these people. Okay, so that's me pretty much covered. So if anybody has any questions, love to be able to talk to you.
Mate, we've got questions. There's no fear of that. But obviously, straight away off from me to you, obviously I've known about this for quite a while now, and obviously some of our long-term, Photographer Academy members will have been with us back, 2 years ago when we started talking about it. But tonight, I think has been really poignant in the fact that it shows not only your passion for the project, which I want to ask you some questions in a minute, but they've already been asked in the chat panel as well. But how important photography is to storytelling and history. And I think we're so used to seeing pretty pictures, and I'm not knocking your pictures, they're great, but without people telling these stories, so many stories, and so many, we never would have known about these soldiers from all over the world tonight, or army men, pilots, civilians. So I think, it just again adds to how important photography still is in this world, even down to, what's going on, documentary wars and disasters and war, but it's so if we don't see it, we can't react and we can't help or get messages out. So my hat's off to you, mate. So my first question is, what drew you to this particular project? What brought you to photograph the first grave at night?
Well, I'm bemused myself, to be honest, because I'm primarily commercially. I was a people photographer. As I said, I did fashion, I did portraits, I did editorial work. I never did landscape photography at all. It was just the idea just came to me. I was the cemetery, Arnos Vale, is actually very, very close to where we lived in Bristol, in Brislington. Well, and we used to walk around there with our dogs, and it was, you know, it was very, very poignant to walk around and see those places. The other thing as well is my father and mother had a very, they were involved in the Second World War. My mother was a very young girl. Her parents were partisans, and my father was Ukrainian, and he was actually conscripted into German Wehrmacht by the age of 12, and he lost his mother. His father disappeared one night, and it was something that obviously affected the rest of his life. And he was very lucky, you know, and always very, very grateful to the UK because he became a British citizen. But he, you know, if he'd gone back to the Soviet Union, he would have been shot. So it was always something that he, you know, he was immensely grateful to the UK for giving him shelter. But it was obviously something that really affected his life, and he lost a whole life and had to restart it all. So I think there's an inspiration from my parents and their experiences. And I was brought up within, you know, English community, Irish community, because you know my parents were Catholic, so we went to Catholic school, and also to Ukrainian and Italian communities. And it wasn't unusual for me, particularly in the Ukrainian communities, to see people who'd lost limbs, arms and legs. And I always remember one gentleman who had a part of his head missing, quite frankly, you know, and that's because of the war wounds that they felt. And that was quite a normal upbringing, if you like. And I'm beginning to see people are losing that kind of memory, and it's becoming something that's becoming a distant memory. In actual fact, it still happens. And these are not things that happened 70 years ago and we can all, you know, breathe a sigh of relief. It's still happening now. So I wanted to kind of use that personal experience to provide the passion for it, really. Let's say it came about from walking around there and wanted to do it differently. I always do things differently. I can never do things in the easy way. And it was great that Arnos Vale, you know, they literally just went, yeah, fantastic, that's a lovely idea, we'd love to do it. So we went from there, and you know, everybody from then onwards has just been incredibly supportive, you know. So yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, and the passion, you know, is self-evident. You know, we can see that and hear that in the way you talk about it, which is incredible. And it's quite weird that even, you know, we've been chatting for over 2 years. Even now, seeing, obviously, I know it's not far from end because we've still got stories to tell, but obviously with the exhibition and even seeing, you know, I hadn't seen the Star Trail images before, you know, so it was another take on those. So, you know, seeing it progress and obviously take shape is incredible. So, I mean, I think that the key thing for us and obviously for you as well is that, you know, personal projects are, you know, are really important anyway, aren't they? You should be doing them for yourselves, whether in your case we've been able to tell these amazing stories from, you know, all these different people, but personal projects are a good way to absolutely, you know, take your photography. So easy to sort of, like you said, your career was people, wasn't it? People and commercial and editorial, and how different this has taken you. And we do that a lot here, or we try to when we're not too busy. Is the Mark will go, right? This, you know, go out and shoot that. You've never shot that before. You know, just as simple as that. Just do something different, and I love that about it. And that's what I love about photography. I could whittle on about photography all night. I won't. I was gonna say, and we did say at the beginning, obviously we have some film, obviously, of you, you know, shooting some of these images, but the questions that have come in about shooting it. So obviously we can see there's a lot of moonlight and natural light used. What are we using? Was it just a single flash? You touched on it on one image. Was it a single flash to pick out?
Some of these are photographed completely on, you know, with the ambient light there. So some of them are moonlight. Some of them are the light is coming from street lighting. One or two of them, one of if people can remember the Australian image. If I bear with me, I'll just escape this and go try if I can go back to it.
Yeah, of course.
So if I click through a few of these, so this one, for example, this is actually photographed. It's a long exposure, but I've got a small flash on here. The Flash Centre were brilliant because they sponsored me. I'm an ambassador for them, and they sponsor me, and they've given me one of their quadra packs, and I was able to just put a small amount of light just on the actual gravestone itself, and then the rest of it is about a 5-minute exposure. I mean, I couldn't even see this stone in the darkness. You can't even see them when you're photographing. So the rest of it is burnt in, and then you've got sort of light pollution is filling up a lot of the space and just very long exposure. But the grave is highlighted just by having the spotlight on it. Again, this one, for example, that is a spotlight. Again, exactly the same kind of procedure as beforehand. This one completely moonlit, nothing but the moon there. And again, just kind of flicking through. Again, this one is a combination of moonlight, ambient light, obviously from the street lighting, and then on Herbert Brossick's grave, I've just put a small amount of flash on there, a little bit of fill-in flash. Again, this one is completely ambient light and also street lighting. So these shadows are stones that are just behind me, and the shadow is being cast by the street lighting. So yeah. Let me see if I can just click down. For some reason, it won't go down. There we go. And again, just to show you the other one. So almost there. So this one, this is actually from a security light on the side of this particular graveyard. This is Holy Souls Cemetery. It's a Catholic cemetery in Bristol, and next to it, there's a television studio. And again, it's actually the easiest cemetery to photograph in because there's security lights all the way around the actual television studio, and they keep them on all night long. So all of the actual light here is from the security lights. All I had to do was just make sure I got correct exposures, and the rest of it is burnt in. You know, so you get, this is obviously street lighting in the background. I have to say, I did particularly like the crane here because there is a kind of cross in the grave. So it's obviously reflecting the actual carving on the stone itself. And again, this has all changed now because this is now a great big block of flats, completely changed. So even, you know, whilst you're doing things like this, you know, things change. Nothing stays static.
Brilliant. I think actually you've nailed quite a lot of the questions. A lot of the questions are about the photography, but as I said earlier, you know, if you haven't done so already, then definitely go and see Marko's film. Sam got to spend the night with him filming, and obviously we have the previous webinar as well, I think, where we talked a lot more about the photography, both available to you on the Photographer Academy. Marko, I could listen to you for hours. I'm so going over, I promise you, before it finishes, but let's remind people, if they do want to go, it's Bristol Cathedral, and it's running till when?
So the 18th of November.
18th of November, so brilliant. So guys, if that is in your neck of the woods, then please go. I'm definitely going over. I actually QR'd the screen when you had it up, and I have that on my phone, and I'm gonna listen to that in the car, and I plug my phone in and listen to the car on the way back now. So, but no, a fantastic project. I love it, mate. And well, I can't see what's next. Is there a next? I know obviously you're still doing this. Is there a new project?
I'm talking at the moment with Commonwealth War Graves Commission and Royal British Legion, because one of the lovely things about doing a personal project like this is it's given me the opportunity to kind of work with organisations like that. They're interested in doing future projects. So, you know, it won't be probably about graves, possibly might be with the Commonwealth War Graves. They are interested in extending this somehow. But the Royal British Legion, we've got a couple of projects that we're talking about. And I'm also doing other work now, which is landscape work. I've completely changed the way I photograph. I still do lots of commissions, you know, I'm a sort of commercial photographer, but I'm lucky now that I'm starting to do a lot more of my, should we say, my personal work. And this particular project has given me the kind of ground, you know, has given me a foundation to build that on. You know, it's built up contacts, built up relationships, and it's built me a portfolio that, you know, means I can kind of walk in and see people now with particular projects. And obviously, once you've got, you know, exhibitions in places like the cathedral, and you've got the kind of backers that we've had from the various organisations, life gets a lot easier because people kind of see you as a known quantity. You know, they start to see you as somebody who can put things together. rather than somebody who you know, maybe a great photographer, but they want to know, can you deliver as well? And that's what actually, as one of the small benefits of this project has been to kind of create that opening for me, really.
Oh, that's brilliant, mate. And I mean, obviously, a lot of time and effort's gone into this, and great to see it. So, well, from me to you, obviously, please come back and tell us about anything that's going on. As always, the Academy would love to support you with that. And let's bring you back about, you know, some of your other stuff. Let's bring you back and let's have a look at the landscapes if you're happy to share. And
Yeah, absolutely.
let's get you back. And I do promise that the next time I'm out in Ireland, hopefully, as long as it's not too the weather's not too bad, I'll come visit, or maybe come with me and we'll shoot the Titanic museum together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely brilliant. But again, from us here, and obviously Anne in the chat panel, lots of thanks and praise for sharing tonight. But it's all, I love it when we talk about these things again, you know, it's truly inspiring, mate. So I love it. You know, it was quite apt, really, that just 2 weeks ago, my nephew Tommy, he's 13. He phoned my mum and dad up and he said, "I'm doing a project about World War One." World War Two, I beg your pardon. And granddad was, you know, so my grandfather, so his great grandfather, who Tommy never knew, he knew was a soldier, and obviously my grandfather was in the Navy, and he was asking for photographs and stories that my dad could share with him, you know, about people that they never knew. So it was great. And I saw pictures of. I do remember, obviously, both my grandfathers, but I never knew my grandfather as a soldier. I just knew him as my grandfather, and I saw pictures of my grandfather as a soldier for the first time ever, you know, at 46 years of age, and it was just like, oh, do you know what? You know, not that I wasn't proud of him anyway, but you know, hearing those stories, my father telling his grandson about my grandfather was, you know, was great. So, you know, these stories are important, you know, and brilliant. So from me to you, thank you so much, my friend. We'll chat real soon anyway. Thank you all for joining us tonight.